Directorate of Criminal Investigations has launched investigations into alleged procurement irregularities at the national carrier Kenya Airways.
The DCI is digging into the procurement of maintenance, repair and overhaul of aircraft engines by KQ.
So the recent cases where the services of the engineers was being tendered. So a tender was done, service providers were invited to make their bids. A team was formed from all relevant stakeholders. They did their evaluation, so now when it comes to awarding the tender was actually now given to number 3.
In yet another case of questionable procurement procedures at Kenya Airways, in 2018, after carrying out a successful request for proposals and tender process for the 5-year maintenance, repair and operations or MRO for 16 Boeing 737-800 engines, the overall best bidder, Israel Aerospace Industries, or AIA for short, was edged out and replaced with the third best bidder, Germany's MTU, exposing Kenya Airways to high cost and more potential losses.
Number 1 was actually, at even the time of tendering, was still providing services to Kenya Airways. So if somebody wakes up and says he wants to give the contract to a company called MTU instead of IAI, which is the Israeli company, simply because somebody is making the deal with MTU. And if you look at the price, the differential between number 1, which is IAI, and MTU, which was number 3, is more than $400 million, and the contract is signed. So somebody is signing a contract where straight away the company is losing $400 million.
Under the Kenya Airways Procurement Procedure Manual 2015, such a contract has to go through 3 commercial and technical evaluation stages. In this tender, IAI scored highest in all the stages. The team recommended that the contract be awarded to the first and second, which was IAI and KLM. This was signed off and approved by top management, including the then CEO Sebastian Mikosh. However, later, some top management alleged that IAI had been blacklisted by KQ and had to be replaced, which begged the question, after inviting them to send a proposal and the grueling months evaluations and finally the approvals, why was that issue not brought up earlier? Current Kenya Airways board chairman Michael Joseph responded to this claim. In a written statement to Africa Uncensored, Joseph said that is not true at all. Initially, the management recommended that we award the contract to IAI, but the board decided, based on information available to it, to award the contract to MTU. But by this time, Kenya Airways had already faced a number of other difficult questions about its procurement processes. Debt-mounted and public frustration with the airline had grown, and a once proud brand had long since lost face. Years before, when Kenya Airways' reputation was soaring, a terrible event would, for the first time since its privatization, bring Kenya Airways unwelcome publicity. Not because of what happened on May the 5th, 2007, but how Kenya Airways handled the days and months after this crucial date.
As of this morning, the total number of remains that have been recovered from site is now 81. So we've recovered 81 remains. Just remember I mentioned that the condition of the remains are not in very good condition.
Douala was the turning point of Kenya Airways. After Douala, Kenya Airways lost its soul. Douala was a very sad event because that is the time Kenya Airways was at its very, very peak, and the thing seriously went wrong.
On May 5th, 2007, a Kenya Airways Flight 507, a Boeing 737-800 aircraft, crashed in a mangrove swamp just 2 minutes after taking off from the Douala International Airport in Cameroon, killing all 105 passengers and 9 crew members.
Him telling me bye. It was so tough for me because not a flight I missed to take him to the airport, except that last one.
Nina Bola's father was among the passengers that died in that crash.
As a person, he was such an amazing man. I mean, I think even just for me being a leader and all the things that I've done is because he really mentored me. I was that daddy's daughter.
Nina's father, Bola Malanda Theo, was a computer engineer, and he worked mostly with central banks across the continent, and he frequently traveled on Kenya Airways.
My dad used to be on KQ flights at least 3-4 times a week because of the nature of his work. And at that point, he was going to Cairo to do some few meetings and then come back the following week. So he went to the airport, and of course we slept. Then the next day when I was driving with my mom to somewhere, we heard at the radio of the car that the plane that left yesterday night, it can't be found. And we knew, of course, this is that.
The aircraft had crashed in a mangrove forest, and it took 3 days for the search and rescue team to locate the crash site.
3 days later, the news was live on TV that they have found the plane. It has crashed in the mangrove, and there's no survivor. So that's another point of breaking again, because we were in agony for 3 days, because at that time you're wondering, do they have food? You're hoping everything. You're hoping that your loved ones are okay.
Dan Okwiri played a key role in the initial investigation and repatriation of bodies.
After the Douala crash in May, 7 months later, nothing had been done. There was a team that had been sent, a South African team, a European team, to finalize, or rather to clean or to repatriate the human remains and technically bring an end to the whole issue. But for 7 months, after identifying the bodies through DNA, pretty nothing much was happening. There was a lot of acrimonious relationship between the Kenya Airways management team and the Douala authorities. And for 7 months, nobody in Kenya Airways actually stepped in Douala to try and sort out the issue. So what was happening is that the bodies that were found, or identified, were put on a container, and nothing was happening. There was a huge team of expatriates, which Kenya was paying millions and millions and millions of shillings every month, tens and tens of millions, and nothing was happening.
It was 7 months of dealing with what can come with that. I don't think we've really recovered even 10, 15 years later, because it's an experience you don't want to, there's nothing the government can tell you or cake you or whoever that can help you sort of cope with the reality. I
finally got authority for Kenya Airways after 7 months to repatriate the bodies. And unfortunately, this team that I was working with, which the KQ sent, the expatriate team, would be taking a lot of the monies from siphoning a lot of monies. We're paying them a lot of monies. Started working against the operation. So here was one Kenya staff. We have this European team whose interests were totally different. Because the longer they stayed in Douala, the more money they were making. And you could see by the fact that KQ was splurging a lot of cash there. They were driving 4-wheel vehicles in Cameroon, which irritated the Cameroonian authorities, seriously irritated them.
As the months went by and families became more frustrated, authorities decided to take them to visit the crash site.
In fact, the day when they took us, one of the things that I felt that was so wrong of them is the guys who were handling the bodies were not far from where we are passing. So these are the guys like, coronavirus with the white whatever, who have put like white canvas, like sheet on the ground in that mangrove, whatever, like midway, and they've placed them down, and then they're standing there and handling these things. And exactly where we are passing, like now, they were doing like convo of families, a certain number, your plan for today, the others tomorrow, like that, to go and see the site. And where we were passing, that was there. In my head, I was like, we couldn't even have been told to. Because You're torn. Do I go check my dad? Did they find a full body? Did they, so many things are going in your head in that point. The following year, journalists like you were going on the site and bones were floating and put it on TV to ask the family. As we are crying 1 year ago, we are being shown videos of Manyama floating in that water, that those guys didn't remove everything. And we've just buried maybe some months, because we buried him in December. This is in May, the following year. Even the burial was quite painful for us. We were given a small wrapped bag, like this size. You can't tell if that's your dad. You don't know if it's a piece of skin, hand, or what. And it was painful to see a small bag like this in a big coffin that would be hermetically closed and then given to you guys to bury. I don't even think I've done any closure with that. People say it's, when you see the body, you can have closure. For many years, I hoped that my dad became like Tarzan.
I got commendations from Senegalese government for an award from them, from the excellent work. I never got anything from Kenya Airways when I came back, sadly enough, very interestingly. And I asked the leadership then. I've worked in Douala all this time. I've come back. Instead, the leadership team, top leadership team in KQ, awarded themselves huge, hefty bonuses. Imagine, for the excellent work in Douala.
An investigation by Cameroonian officials in 2010 and a UK probe established by families of British victims blamed pilot error for the crash, exposing KQ to additional compensation and expensive legal suits. Even though KQ annual reports do not reflect how much was spent on compensation, under the 1999 Montreal Convention, which establishes airline liability in the case of death or injury to passengers, airlines are liable for damages of up to $100,000 special drawing rights for each passenger in case of death.
I don't think the compensation was like us who opted not to go and fight with you guys in court. I don't think the compensation made any sense. I am sorry to say that.
So approximately, can you talk about the figures, like just an approximation?
I don't think I can go ahead with that. But if with the figure I have in my head and my understanding of the nature of what happened, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. It was get some per diem and you figure out the next. Yeah.
On May 5th, 2018, the exact same day of the crash 10 years later, Nina Bola had to work in Cameroon, and the only flight available on that day was a KQ flight.
Kenya Airways, I could not be on a Kenya Airways flight and be comfortable before. It always felt like before that, I think I used Kenya Airways on a transit from Dar es Salaam to Nairobi. It was such a painful one because I kept imagining what my dad was going through at that moment of the crash. It's like I was in it. Like, I don't know how to explain it. That flight, I was very present to it because it was the same day, because I always remember his anniversary. And it was a flight I'm going to Cameroon. So of course I cried in that flight that day, but I was very prayerful because also I thank God that I have grown in my faith and understanding of, I think for me my prayer is that most families that were affected in that time have been able to overcome.
The memories of the crash and the subsequent handling of the issue by Kenya Airways left a devastating effect on the victims' families. So what could KQ have done differently?
I think they should take mental health as the key thing, because no money can refill that loss. I think just how do we work with these people to make it a bit less bearable, you know, emotionally, mentally, you know, because you can't explain that to someone in a week or in a month. Or
Although the crash happened in 2007, 10 years later, KQ still had compensation claims in a Cameroonian court for one passenger, as reported in the 2017 annual report. This was the same year the company brought in a new CEO and new management to turn around the company. However, even the new era of fresh blood could not salvage the company from its long streak of losses, mismanagement, and procurement malpractices.